In this video, we're going to talk about pulling through changes or pulling down changes from Git inside Eclipse. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make a change to a file on GitHub, then update our local repository in Eclipse to pull down those changes. Now I mentioned previously in the course that it's not ideal to make changes directly on GitHub, and in a real world scenario that doesn't happen often, if at all. What usually happens is that another team member will contribute the change on GitHub via his local repository. So he'll actually push his changes from his local repository to GitHub. And then another team member pulls down those changes from GitHub to his local repository. And that's the usual way that team collaboration happens. We might also have a branch involved in that as well. We'll be talking about branches in the next video. Now, of course, there are other kind of scenarios in which different workflow happens in team collaboration, because a lot of this does depend on the way that the company that perhaps you're working for or contracting with is actually set up. But we're going to keep this scenario pretty simple here to show you the basics. So what I'm going to do to simulate another developer making changes is I'm going to make the change on GitHub myself manually. And then we're going to pull those changes down. So let's go to GitHub. We're going to go to our forked project that we forked when we cloned the repository in the previous video. And we're going to make a change to a file, and it doesn't particularly matter which file it is. I'm just going to select one from the first folder. This atomic one, it's as good as any. And we did actually put one change in there, so let's actually make another change somewhere else. So I'll click on the little pencil icon to edit. All right, and put a change there. This is my second comment. Okay, I'm going to commit that and we'll put very important comment. Commit. All right, so we've saved our change to our quote unquote very important comment. If we have a look, going back to the root of this project, we've got another commit now, which should be that change. Very important comment, which we've added to atomic1.java in the concurrent package. All right, so let's swing back to Eclipse now. All right, so how do we go about actually getting that change back into Eclipse, into our local repository? Well, the first thing we need to do is, I'm just going to expand this because we are going to be looking at that. And I'm also going to change this to the history because this is going to be interesting as we're going through, watching what happens there. And I'm just going to expand this out a little bit, the branches, the local, and also the remote. Now currently, we've got a remote tracking, which is the remote repository on GitHub, and our local repository, which is master. Now note the commit ID is the same. And we would have expected that because in the last video, we committed the changes both to the local repository and to GitHub. Now this is important as you're actually tracking changes to see these numbers change when you know that something has changed and whether it's the local repository or the remote repository that has actually changed. So at the moment what we need to do is we need to check to see whether there's some changes on the remote server. So there's a few ways of doing that. One way we could do it, a good way, is just to come up here to click on Git. So I'm going to select my project and come up to Git. I'm going to click on Fetch from Upstream. So that's going out and actually checking to see what changes there are on GitHub. Now you can notice here that it's actually said master, very important comment, and that's the comment that I most recently made earlier in this video. And if we wanted to, we could expand that out and that will actually show the files that are involved. So I'm just going to click OK there. But notice over here now in the Git repository window that we've got an updated ID here. So 76B6510 commit ID for the remote tracking, and the master has still got the same number it had previously. So what that's saying is that we've got some changes on the remote repository that haven't been applied now to the local repository. So how do we go about now applying those changes? Well, that turns out to be quite simple as well. We just come up here to the Git menu again, and this time we're going to click on Merge. Now when we do that, we have to select a branch or tag to merge into the master branch. So we're coming from a branch into another branch. So we want to click on the remote tracking, which is telling Eclipse that we want the changes that have been applied or made in the remote repository to be applied to the master or to our local repository. Now the options here, the one that you want to select is commit, because obviously we do want to commit the change. We've got two other more advanced options. No commit, you can prepare it, the merge commit, but don't commit it yet. I can't see at the moment a reason for doing that in our test. And squash, merge changes into a working tree, but don't create a merge commit. These are more advanced things that 9 times out of 10 you wouldn't be using. So we're going to leave the default commit the result. And the fast forward option, we're just going to leave as the default, which will apply by default in most cases. And we're going to click on merge. So you can see there that merge input, that was our previous repository commit ID or commit version, and the new version have been merged together. So click OK. And notice now both of these have been updated. Now, I have found there are scenarios where this doesn't seem to update. So if you're finding that the IDs are different for some reason, you can come over here and just click on refresh, just to make sure that the latest updates are applied. And that might also apply when you're fetching the changes, as I did earlier in this video as well. So if you don't see anything updating, just click on the refresh. All right, so if we have a look now at the Atomic 1 file, just to confirm the changes in there. This is my second comment. So that got updated just fine. So we've now got the same changes that were applied in the remote repository in our local repository. The other thing I want to talk to you and show you is the stash command, because this is actually quite a useful command, and this enables you to make local changes, to store those changes away, then to apply an update, a new commit that's come from the remote repository, and then to reapply your changes. Now you don't have to do it that way. You might find that just doing the merge is enough to actually do everything you need to do, but it is actually a useful alternative. So I'm going to show you what I mean. I'm going to make a local change. Let's just create another method. So public string, we'll call it process, return Tim. Very easy. Save. So we've now got a local change that hasn't yet been applied to the local repository, as well as not being applied yet to the staging area. Now what I'm going to do now is come up here and click on the project, right click, click on team, and I'm going to click on stashes and stash changes. And we can assign a message, which I do recommend you use to this, and this will then put those changes to one side so that we can actually simulate this other repository update. We can simulate this updated repository change. So I'm going to put, we'll call it process method, seeing as that's what it was. The option here to include untracked files, which may be an option if you're making a big local change and you hadn't committed anything yet, you would actually click that. But in my case, we've only made a change to a file that's already being tracked, so I don't need to do that. So I'm going to click on OK. Now notice when I did that, the method has been deleted or been removed out of the class, and I'll show you a reason for that shortly. But what we want to do now is go back to GitHub. We're going to make another change. So what we're going to do is go back to that file that we just worked on. Concurrent, and it was compatible future 1, I believe. Let's just check for sure that it was. Yes, that's the right file. All right, so we'll go back to GitHub, and we're going to make a change to that file. We'll put an updated comment in here. Doesn't really matter what we put in there. We just want to simulate what's happening and save it. All right, so we've now got a change that's been applied to from the remote repository and also on the local repository. Noting that the two commit IDs are the same at the moment, let's do the same as we did before. Click on Git and click on Fetch from Upstream. Noticing the ID change down here for the remote tracking, click on OK. Then let's quickly apply those changes again. So Git, merge. And we're just going to leave the default options and click on merge. Updated comment, that's the comment that came back from the remote repository that I just created just now. And now what we can do is we can actually bring back those commands that we stashed, or the changes that we stashed. So I can click on right click, team, stashes. Notice there's now an option here, 0 process method. So that's the only stash that's on file at the moment. So I'm going to click on process method, and that will tell us the files that were involved. I'm going to go back to Git staging here. At the moment there's nothing in there. And I'm going to click on over here to apply stashed changes. And you can notice the file has now been still unstaged, but the changes have been reapplied. So I can go back to that file, and there's our method that's come back again. Now, obviously we could have used the merge as well, and the merge would most likely have done this for us automatically, but I just wanted to point out there's another option with the stash command for you to actually do that. So the stash command would be more appropriate when you had a lot of changes across a lot of files, and perhaps it was something that you were testing and you didn't necessarily want that to be your local changes to be updated with the changes from the repository. So you stash those changes away to be added back later. So the other alternative again was just to do a merge, and more than likely the merge would have actually successfully fixed these things anyway and merged both changes together. Alright, so you now know the way to actually pull data from GitHub back down into your local repository and work on it that way. We went through two different methods, including the merge and the stash as an alternative or addition to the merge to protect your local changes. Alright, so let's move on to the next video now. And in that video we're going to start looking at some basic branching. So I'll see you in the next video.